Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this latest Anzu webinar, Brands, Gamers and Advertising. What's the story in 2022? My name is Michael Brennan, and I'm really pleased to host this afternoon's session. I'm an independent research and insight professional. Happily, we have three experts joining us this afternoon to discuss the findings of Anzu's UK Advertising Research Report 2022. If I could introduce my colleagues. First of all, we're delighted to have Elizabeth Lane, Head of Research and Measurement at the IAB UK. Hello, Elizabeth. Next up, we have Michael Manning, who is the Product Manager at Xaxis UK. Afternoon, Michael. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Neil Pummel, Sales Director at Anzu here in the UK. Afternoon, Neil.
Hi, mate.
Great to have you all with us, as indeed it is great to have such a big audience this afternoon. I think indicative really of the interest in gaming and the opportunities that it presents to advertisers today. So without further ado, he says, let's get into the presentation. I'm hoping. Bear with me, just a slight technical glitch. Thank you. And here we go. So this afternoon we'll be talking about brands, gamers and advertising. What's the story in 2022? And the basis for this initial sort of 15-minute presentation was the recently launched UK advertising report from Anzu, which if you have a look at your control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a couple of important sections. One is called handouts, within which you will find a PDF of the UK advertising report. So if you have not yet seen a copy, please do feel free to download from there. And most importantly, you will see a chat function within that section of the screen, and that's where we'd really like you to post your questions. Probably best if you were to post your questions as soon as they arise, anything you hear in the presentation, anything you hear in the initial discussion, and we will pick those up in the second half of the webinar. We really do want to hear your thoughts, perspectives, feedback, challenges. That's the beauty of these sessions, is to get as much interaction as possible. So let's get going. So I guess the big picture sort of story that we're looking to tell from an Anzu perspective and across the in-game advertising industry is to shift the perceptions of gamers, away from the sense of gaming and gamers as outsiders, to improve the understanding of today's gamers as arguably the ultimate insiders. So if you cast your minds back into the 80s, into the 90s, gamers were really seen to be quite different to the mainstream. Certainly pejorative sort of interpretation of young male gamers isolated in their rooms, etc., etc. Times have moved on, of course, but it's important to recognise that key marketing decision makers, the average age is circa 40 years old, coming of age around about the turn of the millennium, and that obviously predates the launch of important digital landmarks like Facebook, which is around 2004, or indeed the iPhone, which launched in 2007. Always quite incredible to think how recent these innovations and platforms actually are. So clearly, marketers of a certain age and background will have grown up with this idea of gamers as sort of outside the mainstream, somewhat deviant, if you like, a little bit different to everyone else. So we're really here to play our part in shifting those perceptions of the gaming audience. And part of the story we've been telling is that gamers are an incredibly diverse and attractive audience. You'll have seen numbers in multiple sort of forums and spaces talking about the billions of gamers there are worldwide. And I can tell you from a research sort of perspective, it's increasingly difficult to find non-gamers as opposed to finding sort of gamers. But quite apart from sheer numbers, it's really important to understand their relationship with the world around them, how they relate to today's sort of digital consumer culture, what sort of categories they're active in, where they're influential. So a really interesting sort of audience, as well as the sheer scale of it. Equally, it's important to emphasize that gaming serves sort of multiple purposes. Such a diverse group of individuals participating in gaming. Obviously, each of them has their own motivations and needs. You'll see through our research results that gaming drives a really powerful sort of source of identity for individuals. Within the pandemic, and especially, of course, during the lockdowns around the world, gaming really shone through and provided a fantastic sort of escape opportunity during lockdown. And that links very nicely into the fact that gaming is sort of underpinning a social and entertainment sort of paradigm. Connectivity was critical to the role of gaming through the pandemic. A real sort of bonus, if you like, for gamers to be able to continue to connect and engage with their peers whilst escaping from the day-to-day. And of course, we want to emphasize that in-game advertising presents a new opportunity for brands. It's important to emphasize that gamers today are open to and welcome brand advertising. That feels quite a bold statement if you think about that dated sort of perception of gamers. Today's gamers fully integrated into the sort of consumer world and actively looking to see more brand advertising within games. In-game advertising today is still relatively novel. You'll see that it's only a minority of gamers who are regularly exposed to in-game advertising. So for those early movers and those brands who are investing in this space and learning how to get best out of the medium, there's a fantastic opportunity to sort of cut through. And finally, the sheer presence of brands within games significantly enhances the brand's relevance to the gaming audience and the gaming communities. So to summarize that sort of opening section, messages that we've been talking about for a little while, just emphasizing the huge sort of reach and diversity of the audience that's available through gaming. Gaming is obviously a particularly high engagement medium, a lean forward medium, one that people are fully immersed in whilst they're playing. And this novel aspect to in-game advertising offers an opportunity to cut through and really create an impact. So that's the sort of start point, the story that we have been telling. Today, with the investment in the proprietary research study, we can now sort of move the conversation forward with some, hard statistics, hard evidence on some of the aspects that we've talked about. So, for example, gamers being savvy and influential sort of consumers. Our UK research told us that over half of them are asked for product and service recommendations, asked for their advice by their peers, by their friends, by their family, by their colleagues, etc. Almost half, a very similar number, see themselves as influential, but what they buy, what they do, where they choose to go has an influence amongst their peer group. There's a real sense of eagerness to be the first to know about new stuff, such an important sort of social currency, if you like, being ahead of the game, being the one to tell others what's hot in different categories and different markets at the time. And a similar proportion also, I think it's incredibly important to be the first to buy and try new stuff. Again, that sort of social currency, being the first to share, the first to know, the first to try different things. And I guess, that's buying new stuff lends itself, to the tech category. And indeed, almost half of our UK gaming audience expect to be in the market for new tech within the next month. But of course, it's not just about technology. This is a diverse sort of audience. It isn't just young men. It's many, many women sort of gamers as well. And indeed, we see that almost 60% of our UK gamers expect to be in the market for fashion within the next month. So they're active, they're influential, they're highly engaged, and they're spending money on a regular basis. So an attractive audience in anyone's book. We touched on the range of functions that gaming can fulfill for today's gamers. We mentioned the fact that it's a powerful source of identity for many people today. And you may be surprised to know that 45% of our UK gamers said they would most definitely identify themselves as such, i.e. they would most definitely identify themselves as gamers, which is a very strong sort of statement. But that's not the whole story, because there's a further third of the UK respondents who are happy to identify as gamers to some extent. So that adds up to almost 80% of our UK gamers are happy to identify as such to at least some extent. Unsurprisingly, and as you've seen elsewhere, 57% of our gamers said they spent a lot more time gaming through the pandemic. And I'm sure many people on this call could probably agree with that sentiment. It was such a fantastic escape, from the stresses and pressures of lockdown, particularly in many family households. And then finally, again, just to really nail this idea of gamers as outsiders, as isolated, as different, 78% of our UK gamers said it's really important to them to meet new people and have new experiences. They're highly social, highly active. Gaming underpins that sort of paradigm, but they're active offline as much as they are online. They're building relationships through digital, through gaming, but they're also out and about in bars and restaurants and different social activities, just like the rest of us, because in fact, they are all us. And then just touching on the in-game advertising opportunity, really. So we mentioned that people are actively looking to see their favorite brands within games. So 51% of people said they welcome brand advertising in principle. They don't have some mental block. They don't think gaming is some sacred space where brand advertising isn't welcome. They welcome brand advertising in principle. 42% say it's important to them to see their favorite brands in the games that they're playing. There's this sense that the advertising adds to the realism of all sorts of different games, and they want to see their favorite brands in there. Going further, albeit slightly smaller number, 29% of people say that advertising enhances their gaming experience, but we can add that to a further 42% who are kind of neutral. The ads don't bother them. They're not opposed to them. So putting those together, you're heading towards 3/4 of the UK gaming population who are actively welcome the advertising, say it enhances their gaming experience, or they're neutral. They're not opposed to advertising. They recognise it's part of the game, if you'll forgive the pun. And then finally, in that bottom row, it's unusual to see such a low number on a presentation of this nature, but 16%, only 16% of our UK gamers have seen in-game advertising quite often. I'm struggling to think of any other digital space where you could say that. And then added to the 16% is 33%. So around about half of the UK gaming population consciously remember being exposed to in-game advertising at least a few times. And that's the size of the opportunity. Half of that audience are yet to be engaged by brand advertising through their gaming experiences. Just to touch on the research methodology, so throwing some initial sort of research findings at you. Who did we talk to? Well, in the UK market, we spoke to 1,200 gamers and 350 non-gamers. You can see that there's a fairly even gender split. And quite a diverse sort of age profile ranging from 18 to 64 in total. We allowed for a natural fallout of gaming respondents rather than attaching hard quotas to different age bands, etc. So this was the natural fallout. When we look at those gamers by the platforms on which they play, unsurprisingly, mobile is played by the largest share of the audience, followed by console, PC, etc. But I think it's really important also to note that only 13% of our UK gamers only played games on mobile. So the overwhelming majority, 87%, are playing games across at least sort of 2 platforms. And I think on average across our research for gamers under the age of 45, they were playing on average 3 devices. So worth bearing in mind when you're thinking about your approach to the gaming market. Our research was ambitious, and it's fair to say there was some pent-up demand. So, you know, a lot of questions asked, a range of topics, obviously getting under the skin of the core gaming dynamics, time spent playing, platforms used, devices used to play games, touching on the pandemic experience, going into their attitudes to in-game advertising, and then the broader context of brand advertising, marketing, consumer attitudes, and then into individual advertiser categories. So we covered 7 advertiser categories there, including finance, entertainment, fashion, motors, FMCG, consumer tech, and personal care. And then finally, quite a detailed socio-demographic profile, including gender, sexuality, ethnicity, age, professional status, living circumstances, etc. So we've got a real rich body of data, research findings that we're delighted to share with you. And what we found through all of that research, you know, is really putting some flesh on this idea of the diversity of the audience. Yes, it's great to talk about gender and demographics, but, you know, it's much more important to think about different sort of lifestyles and behaviors. So their relationship with car driving, their relationship with finance, you know, are these people who are planning for their future? Are these people who are trying to get their money to work harder for them? Are these people who are excited by fintech, etc.? Their relationship with technology, probably one of the categories you would think is fairly synonymous with gamers, but the evidence there, which are the brands they think are the coolest? You know, is it Apple, is it Samsung, is it any of the others? Their degree of influence and recommendation within their communities, their personal sort of status as parents, homeowners, professionals, business owners, and so on and so forth. So you can see the flexibility and the opportunity to learn more about this audience and to match your sort of brand needs, if you like, to the opportunities within the medium. And of course, the diversity of the audience is only matched by the diversity of the medium itself, which is, you know, really the challenge going forward in terms of, you know, planning effective in-game advertising campaigns, matching the audiences to the individual game franchises and titles, which is, you know, an ongoing sort of work, and that's where the experts at Anzu can come in and really help you. And just to emphasize really that opportunity for brands within the gaming space. So 66% welcome brand advertising in principle, 47% say relevance is the golden rule for brand advertisers. So we gave them a range of options as to which should be the golden rule. And I guess it's fair to say that most of us expected don't interrupt a gamer, don't make them wait, etc. And they were all important, but by far the number one golden rule for brand advertisers is relevance to the medium, to the individual sort of gaming experience. Just to reiterate, 42% say it's important to see their favorite brands, 29% say brand advertising enhances their gaming experience, and almost 1 in 5 already, bear in mind only half of them have really seen in-game advertising, say that it's in-game advertising that makes a brand stand out in today's marketplace. And then just to touch on a few takeaways from the category research, just to whet your appetite, we've got about 3/4 of our UK gamers owning at least one car, a quarter saying their next car will definitely be electric. So we kind of need to close that gap if we're going to save the planet. 66% say it's important to them to always look their best. 64% say they always want to buy the best home care brands, and so on and so forth. 30% are shopping for premium or luxury fashion, and 30% are open to using buy now, pay later services in the future. So just some example sort of data points from the category research. And that's really a whistle-stop tour through our research findings. Hopefully it gives you a little flavour of the content within there. Hopefully it's given you some food for thought, hopefully challenged some assumptions that you may have around the medium. And I think the next thing to do, it would be great to get a sort of initial response from our panelists. So he says, pausing for breath after that whistle-stop tour. Could I turn to you, Elizabeth? What are your instinctive, immediate sort of reaction to the research that you've seen? And I know that you've read the report previously.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and also thank you very much for inviting me to be on this panel today. I don't know if everybody on the attendee list that knows who the IAB are, but we're the trade body for digital advertising, and the reason I was invited to come along to this panel today is because we did some research last year looking at digital habits and how they changed during the pandemic, and particularly did a deep dive into the gaming community. And for me, I think what I really picked up on, Michael, from what you were just presenting is your emphasis that gamers don't all look and feel the same, because that's, you know, exactly right. And I know we'll probably talk a bit more about the fact that misperceptions still exist and how we can sort of start to bust some of those myths. But you showed that they, you know, they range in age, gender, platform use, interests, and that's exactly what we saw as well in our research. And I think I'd probably add another element to that, which is that, as you picked up on, their gaming habits are not all the same either, and what their experience is like, and the drivers for why they get into gaming is so wide ranging, which really has an impact on what advertisers need to consider and prioritize when it comes to engaging with them. So yeah, I'm sure we're going to delve into all of that, but the diversity of the gaming community is what really stood out for me in what you just presented.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elizabeth. And Michael Manning from Xaxis. What are your thoughts there? What stood out for you? Any surprises?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael, for inviting me on as well. Just to quickly introduce why I'm here as well. I'm Mike. I'm a product manager at Xaxis, and I'm the product lead for our video solution at Xaxis, our privacy and identity solutions, but also our gaming solution, which is why I'm being brought onto this panel. I think what really jumped out to me, what I thought was really interesting, and I was pleasantly surprised by, was how receptive the gamers that were asked, how receptive they were to the concept of advertising, to the concept of advertising in games. What was it? 2/3 of gamers would welcome more. Perhaps incorrectly, I had a bit of an association in my mind between a gaming audience and or just gamers being perhaps quite advertising averse, perhaps the generation that would have ad blockers, but or at the very least be resistant to advertising in some way. Perhaps it's kind of me being a gamer as well as being a product manager, building advertising solutions. So I was kind of aware of my own biases, so conscious of my own biases. But it's great to see that stat, and it's certainly something we're seeing with our kind of campaigns is users are responding, and they're responding positively. So I think it just undoubtedly we'll come onto it later. And dig into it in a bit more detail, but I just think it chucks up the point that, you know, advertisers have got to get it right, marketers have got to get it right, but when they do, gamers are receptive to it, and they see the value in it.
Thanks, Michael. And I think you're absolutely right. In fact, the research really showed a divide, if you like. It was the older gamers, the ones over 45, who are maybe the purists, as you describe, who are a bit sort of more commercially averse, whereas the younger generation, born into a consumer society, it's in their DNA, and that bleeds through into their expectations of the gaming experience. Neil, I'm sure you would agree with that, but what stood out for you from that initial look at the research?
Yeah, thanks. I'm obviously here because I work for Anzu, so obviously I'm quite invested in this. But yeah, for me, I mean, the welcome stuff, you know, I know Michael's just covered it off as well, but you know, that's really key. When you think about advertising experiences everywhere, you think about how agency groups are prioritizing advertising that it seems as welcomed. You know, that is really, really key. I think you look at, when you look at some of the pictures that we've got in terms of how gaming looks and the experience looks, you kind of see this, it's quite credible. You know, it's out of home in a virtual world, but it's clever, it's blended into the game. So if it's a football game, it's around the perimeter fencing, so it kind of resonates with people. I think people think it's more credible. I think I love blowing myths away. So I love the fact that it's, you know, the person is very social. You know, that 25 to 44, when you read the report in a bit more detail, the 25 to 44 age group, you know, they're much more likely to be social. They're twice as likely to be social than kind of the average. So that's kind of really interesting. I think gaming as a passion point as well, that comes across for me, is that, you know, when people identify as gamers, I think that you can see now it's a shift in that the pandemic has really put a spotlight on how much time is spent with gaming. So for an advertiser's point of view, you know, if that is where time is being spent and it's been spent with kind of welcome advertising, it becomes really interesting kind of proposition for them to kind of look at. So yeah, that would be my kind of initial takeouts, but I'm sure we're going to go a little bit deeper into it as well. I hope so. We've got another half hour, so it'd be good to.
That's great, Neil. Thanks very much. I think really important to introduce that central dynamic, you know, that passion that people have for gaming, and how brands and advertisers can harness that, you know, to their benefits. But I'd probably just like to take kind of a step back and pick up on something Elizabeth mentioned around the sort of misrepresentation of gaming. At times, I feel that gaming is arguably held to a higher standard than is maybe applied to other channels and other media. Perhaps unfairly, you know, just looking very objectively across the treatment of different media and different digital channels. Elizabeth, I know you've looked a little bit at that. What are your thoughts? Is gaming treated unfairly?
I think when it comes to the stereotype that still exists, yeah, absolutely, and it's just you were saying at the beginning of your presentation, Michael, about maybe 10 years ago there was this misperception, but I would argue actually still the media doesn't really help that image of what a gamer looks like. I mean, we were doing our research last year, we looked at some of the headlines about gaming that were coming out of the press, and even I mean it would be interesting to see whether people on this this webinar, if you Google search the word gamer and you look at images, what comes up, because I would bet it's a variation on the theme of a young person in a bunker somewhere plugged into the Matrix, because that's still the sort of image that comes up, and it's really outdated. And the stats you were just showing in your presentation, Michael, completely resonated with what we saw in our research last year. You almost can't say what a gamer is because everybody is a gamer. And one of the things that I found really interesting last year when we did our research was how 1 in 10 gamers is over 55, and that's on a daily basis. So people who play games every day, that image doesn't come up in your Google image search at all, but that's, you know, 1/10 of the population is over 55. And we also saw that as you were saying, the biggest growth area is that sort of 35 plus audience, a really sort of key target audience for brands to be looking at with high sort of purchase power. It's not really talked about in the mainstream media as the gaming community looking like that. And again, yeah, people really resonating with the term gamer as well. I think it was really interesting as well that people are playing games, but they're also not necessarily put off by the moniker gamer. It sort of resonates with how they feel, what they're doing, and almost in some circumstances we found it was seen as sort of a badge of honor for how they're spending their time and the benefits that they get from their spare time. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the gaming community is almost unrecognizable from what you would see in the media. The reality is very different to that.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'll just take the opportunity actually to remind the audience, before we get carried away discussing this ourselves, it would be really welcome to get some questions to burst our bubble and bring in some sort of external perspective. So fire away, please, people. Michael Manning, turning to you, is the gaming industry, gamers themselves, is it unfairly treated, do you think, relative to other media and channels, or is it right to be held to account to a higher standard, if you like, as a relatively new medium?
It's an interesting question. I mean, yeah, I think to a degree it is kind of treated unfairly. I mean, it's a stat that a lot of us will be familiar with about kind of the size of the gaming industry in terms of consumer entertainment spending. Like it's bigger than film, it's bigger than music, and yet you wouldn't try to kind of isolate and categorize music listeners as kind of musicers or whatnot. It's kind of, broadly speaking, we're talking about adults. We're talking about a general adult population. So I think it is treated a bit unfairly to that, but it's changing, which is really, really positive. And you know, speaking personally, you know, I'm someone that's grown up with games, and probably if you asked me 10 years ago or 15 years ago, would I kind of loudly and proudly identify as a gamer? Probably not. But I think things have changed for the positive in that sense. So which is great.
Thanks, Michael. So Neil, are you more proud to be a gamer or more proud to be a Spurs fan? How does it stand?
Well, I mean, clearly at the moment, that wasn't a question I was expecting, but clearly a gamer. And I think that was a low blow coming from you, Michael. Brennan, there's no need for that. I think the word scrutiny is really interesting because I find that I agree with everything that's been said, which doesn't make it necessarily an exciting panel discussion. But to be honest with you, the scrutiny, and if you think about it, it's because something new. So I'm speaking to advertisers all the time about obviously trying to use the channel for the first time. And as you said, there is a significant and interesting opportunity for brands that do move first and do move fast, because there is a share of voice and share of market argument there, as you saw from some of the stats. And the scrutiny that they do go under is not a surprise, because it's new, and it's new to them, and it's new to how it's sold in, where it sits within agencies, and it becomes a very different question. But if you applied the same level of scrutiny back to the channels that have been established and used over the years, it kind of you would be asked some of the questions that we're being asked, you wouldn't potentially be able to answer for TV, for example. Now, I sometimes feel, I think that's the kind of really interesting thing.
That's great. Thanks very much, Neil. And I should explain, actually, I'm not sure everyone in the audience will be aware as to what's going on the screen in front of them, but we have a very talented illustrator attempting to visualize and bring to life the conversation and the discussion that we're having. So that is the artwork that is being created on the fly in front of your very eyes as we talk. Just finally on this sort of diversity and gaming identification, we talked about the ages of gamers. Elizabeth, you were highlighting the fastest growth coming from the over 35s, 1 in 10 gamers being over 55. I think it's also worth just mentioning in that context of gamer identification that this, we've moved on in terms of ethnicity as well. A lot of that representation is very much young white males. Obviously, particularly polarized discussion in the States over the years in terms of gamer identification. But in the UK, our research shows quite really encouraging figures in terms of identifying as gamers amongst minority audiences. So, for example, 73% of people who identified as bisexual said they were most definitely happy to identify as a gamer. That's based on a very small sample, but if I merge it with the UK and the USA, that's over 60%, which suggests a very sort of positive story emerging there. The same is true of ethnicity, where the proportion of non-white sort of audiences in the UK, over 56%, chose to most definitely identify as a gamer. And that sort of blows away some of that backstory and culture war type stuff that was going on maybe a decade or so ago. So I thought that was worth highlighting really at this stage. So to move us forward then, just thinking about the pandemic. So we've talked about the need and the growing appreciation of the diversity, the scale, the attractiveness of this gaming audience. To what extent do you think the pandemic has, sort of accelerated that learning curve for brands and advertisers? How beneficial, if you like, is a horrible expression, but has the pandemic served a purpose in terms of shining a light on the role of gaming in society and in individuals' lives? I'm going to pick on you again, Elizabeth, if you don't mind.
Well, I think certainly the pandemic had an enormous effect in terms of everyone's digital media habits as a whole, and I think that partly helped shine a light on some of the areas that maybe advertisers and agencies weren't so familiar with, like gaming. I don't necessarily think it wasn't new. It wasn't like nobody was doing gaming and then suddenly the pandemic came along and then suddenly went, oh yeah, we've got all this time now, we'll start doing gaming. There was a huge community before that, but I think the fact that we were all stuck at home and digital was our way of communicating and connecting with people shone a light on the fact that actually gaming is part of that too. And I think that's something, again, that I think you really picked up on in your presentation, Michael, is that actually there are so many reasons why people go into gaming, and a lot of that is to connect with other people, to socialize, as a way of sort of using gaming as a sort of tool for mental well-being as well. And I think all of that came into the fore when we were all struggling through lockdown, and gaming is one of those ways, and a really core way of connecting with people and connecting with yourselves as well. And I think that really helped sort of shine a light on a medium that maybe had been ignored to a certain extent before the pandemic. I think what's also, just to pick up on another point that was really interesting that we found during our research that we did last year about how gamers sort of tap into everything else, is that actually gamers aren't isolated in their media use either. And actually gamers as a community, because they're so mainstream, they're also more likely to over-index on everything else as well. So we were looking at all kinds of digital media habits in our research, not just gaming. And what was really interesting was that somebody who's into gaming is also more likely to be into podcasts, into VOD, into social media use. They're just more digitally engaged. And I think, again, the pandemic really sort of highlighted that as a sort of factor in our digital media habits. So yes, I don't think it was that we suddenly all turned to gaming during the pandemic, but it was certainly something that's got into the spotlight because we were all using digital media more generally.
Shone a light on it, didn't it, essentially, really?
What are your thoughts, Michael? Did the pandemic sort of have an impact in your world? Was it changing sort of conversations? Yeah,
I think it's an interesting one, because I don't think the pandemic itself, to your point, I think you kind of touched on it, Elizabeth. I don't think the pandemic is the point with which gaming suddenly exploded. I think it was trending in this direction, and the audience was there. Yes, it probably kind of expedited advertisers and marketers starting to kind of look at it a bit more, but I think it was going in that direction. It was noticing from the report the kind of the increased gaming consumption habits during the pandemic. It totally makes sense, and it was positive to see that the gamers kind of would continue playing in that way, or stated that they would continue playing. It makes sense. People were buying their kind of their pelotons and signing up to various different subscription VOD services, but they're also buying gaming hardware. Everyone knows it was a nightmare to try and get gaming hardware during that kind of 18-month period. So people were buying these things during the pandemic as well, and so it would make sense they want to continue. So I do think it probably expedited, to think from a kind of client view or marketer's view, probably expedited the kind of turning focus from marketers towards gaming, but I think it was trending that direction anyway, and it probably increased kind of gaming habits and the volume of audience actually kind of visible and playing. But it's, as I say, it was going in that direction.
Thanks, Michael. And Neil, were you seeing any sort of impacts in your day-to-day through the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's interesting, isn't it, for me, is kind of bringing back to research a little bit some of the device-led. And I think that, as you said, the perception of the gamer is, as you say, someone on a console in a room locked away, and then you actually look at it, 72% it's mobile. And maybe I think we were talking another time about this, weren't we? When in terms of like, if you can almost chart the growth of the kind of smartphone and mobile itself, and then how that's kind of opened up gaming, I think, and then the amount of games that you can play and where people can play. And I think that's where you potentially have the more kind of casual gamer that may not identify. I mean, I kind of feel like that, as Michael was saying earlier, is that you're not a filmer and you're not a musicer, so social media. So, it's just a passion point. It's a passion point that's been highlighted by the pandemic, and which is brilliant to see that more people are going to continue that kind of level. But I think mobile as well is really grown and kind of grown the market in that way. And I think what was interesting as well for what you were talking about, Mark, was that, but yet a lot of people, I think once you try maybe on mobile, then suddenly you might move to PC, you might move to console as well, as a high percentage of people. I think you said it's 87% or something that are kind of across two. And I think that's quite interesting as well. So it just leads to more kind of gameplay. There's certainly a way to kind of switch off and enjoy your time effectively.
I think that mobile trend is only going to be further kind of solidified or kind of crystallized, with 5G on the horizon and better advanced handsets, coming out every year. And kind of better capabilities. It does chuck up an interesting question, which I think you're alluding to a bit then, around the kind of different types of game sessions and the kind of I guess they're kind of gaming moments, and how marketers can speak to gamers in different moments. Is a user session on a kind of mobile perhaps can be slightly shorter in nature, but PC console could be slightly longer, perhaps more immersion. It doesn't mean one kind of one platform connecting with a gamer in one platform is better than others. I think what we take from it is that any gaming activation should really factor in all platforms. Marketers should be factoring in all platforms to speak to gamers kind of in any of those gaming moments. That's kind of where we're thinking about it.
That's great. Thanks very much, everyone. We're going to open up to the audience Q&A now. I think they've probably got a feel for our thoughts and perspectives on the market. So it'd be great to hear some questions from the room. So first question I have is from the research. It's obvious that the gaming landscape has evolved tremendously over the past few years. Very good thought. Do you think it will continue to change, or will we begin to see things settle down? Let's go in reverse order this time. Mr. Neil Pummel, what are your thoughts there? Do you think we'll see continued evolution in the gaming landscape, or will things sort of settle down here?
I suppose in terms of what that kind of means, evolution, I mean, I think that if you think of platforms like Roblox, for example, and I think Michael makes a really good point in terms of mobile, PC, console, and then you have these Fortnite, Roblox in particular. We kind of work with Roblox, and you're seeing that kind of generational, it's a town where nobody under 20, a town where no one over 25 lives. I mean, it is just a channel for 25 and under. So there's, within gaming, there is bespoke channels to talk to discrete audiences as well, so I think that's and the growth of Roblox over the last 2, 3, 4 years is incredible. So I think that, and how that is looking to expand, and this is where the kind of M word and metaverse comes in, but what that actually means and what that actually looks like is really interesting. Talking about a client was asking the other day, can you speak to your experiences about hosting concerts within Roblox, and that's already kind of starting to emerge in terms of how we do that. So I think the evolution is gonna grow, it's gonna change. I think it'll be interesting to see, will Roblox become a bit like other platforms such as social media, where it starts off quite young and then it kind of migrates to an older audience as well? How's that? Is that going to happen? Is that going to kind of be the same kind of thing there? So I think there's a lot still to look at, and as I said, I think there's a lot of interest for advertisers as well in the different arenas that they can do. How do brands respond to that? So we've seen some brands building their own Roblox experiences, which is fantastic. But a lot in the luxury sector, so Ralph Lauren, Gucci, so really interesting stuff like that.
That's great, thanks, Neil. I'm going to turn to Elizabeth on the question that I've got here in front of me as the head of research and measurement at the IAB. What's the best way to measure the success of an in-game advertising campaign?
Goodness me,
just
that
a quick
is
one for you, Elizabeth.
A very, I mean, I would argue in no different way to the way you would be measuring the effectiveness of any other platform. And I think there's, gaming, as we've been talking about, there's so many different ways. I mean, gaming is so different across different platforms, so you would need to look at it in terms of what sort of game you're talking about. But in terms of the brand loyalty that you can get from gaming, I mean, we've been talking, Michael M was talking about the fact that you might get slightly different experiences in terms of session length, time, number of times that you game on a smartphone, for example, compared to a more immersive experience on a console. But they both have very sort of lean forward, engaged audiences, and so the way that all of the advice that the IAB gives on how to measure effectiveness in terms of brand uplift, favorability, awareness, loyalty of your audiences is all the same, and all opportunities exist on gaming. So I'd say no different, without going into all the details, no differently to the way that you should measure on all other platforms. And we have plenty of advice on our site on how to measure digital campaigns more generally. Audiences that have the same high expectations on gaming as they do on other platforms as well. So again, I think it was Michael earlier sort of saying it doesn't mean that on one platform you can make, it doesn't mean, for example, on smartphone you can bombard people with advertising because it's short sessions. They have high expectations, and you were talking, Michael, as well about the fact that they're a very savvy audience. They know what they're talking about as well. So we have to sort of use the same principles and measure in exactly the same way as well.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Elizabeth. I think that's a really important message. Sorry, Michael, were you going to say something?
I was just going to build upon what Elizabeth said there, because I think it's really important. It's such a nascent space for marketers that we do really need to kind of come to marketers with a way of proving the value, with a way of measuring success. From our perspective, I think when you're speaking to kind of brand outcomes, that's really where we see the value of gaming and in-game, not necessarily kind of positioning it as something where you can kind of similar to other digital channels where you can measure an action afterwards and track an action afterwards. You don't want to stop a gamer racing around a racetrack to click on something or engage with something or make an action. It's just going to cheese them off a bit, to be honest. So we're really focusing on that kind of brand outcome piece, and the results have been really strong. And to your point, Elizabeth, they're strong across mobile and they're strong across other kind of gaming platforms. So clearly users are in this engaged mindset. They are immersed on both platforms to greater and less degrees, but they're still immersed, and that's generating great results in terms of things like recall, things like awareness, brand favorability. Like the results we've seen when you compare them to other media channels, even the results we've seen have been really strong. So that's just kind of building upon that point. Yeah, sorry to jump in.
No, thanks, Michael. I've got one for you, Neil, if I may. Do you have any tips for how brands can stand out when running in-game ads? Any thoughts on how they can?
Yeah, I think it's so I was having lots of conversations around this, and it's really interesting because it's almost like it's the newest medium, and yet you almost got to treat it in terms of how fairly basic way in which you look at the creative. We're seeing some really good, be up for recent campaigns sort of 15-20 seconds on average, but I would always suggest for where we're talking at the moment is it's very clear. It's a very clear logo, it's a very clear strap line, it's short and sharp, it's let people make sure the brand is standing out massively, because as the guys have just been saying, how we're measuring this at the moment is by brand lift studies, and I think attention is one of the companies we use, Lumen, for example. I think attention's become a really big important part on particularly in digital. It should be an important part of any advertising, and it is, but I think that we feel like we score well in there because you are on screen for a good amount of time, but again that you're not going to be able to get a complicated message across. So and as Michael just said, you're not interrupting the gameplay, so you don't click here. So it's very simple. It's logo, it's strap line, it's kind of, Samsung have done it really well in a couple of campaigns they've done recently as well. It's just it's really, that's for me is the way forward. I'm sure Michael, you've probably seen a few in terms of case studies as well.
Yeah, exactly that point, like not trying to do too much with your creative and really land a kind of a clear, concise, salient point, and then the results are really strong. Like it's it's the way to approach it.
We've also got a question just as to whether Anzu plans to do similar research in any other markets. And I guess the short answer is kind of watch this space. There appears to be demand. So we'll see how things evolve. Is there anything to add to that, Neil?
No, exactly that. Yeah, definitely.
And this is an interesting one. So this is one for all three of you. Conscious of time now, we're into the last sort of 5 minutes or so. So if you can keep it brief and pithy, please. Are there brands that are more suited to the gaming environment, or do you believe that any brand can succeed? Who'd like to go first? I'm going to take Michael Manning first.
Sounds good. I think as a product manager building an in-game solution, there's low-hanging fruit in terms of kind of clients and advertisers. I think telco brands, tech or kind of consumer goods brands in the tech space. Those are low-hanging fruit. But I think really, all the research that we've gone through today shows this is an all adult audience. Therefore, there's relevance for all verticals really, and we can kind of break down kind of how certain genres of games index for certain types of user, certain audiences, and break it down that way, kind of, and that's interesting to see. But it's as we've been going through, it's a broad church gaming, and that means there's relevance for all kinds of client verticals.
Thanks, Michael. There's a thought, the church of gaming. Neil, any thoughts on what brands can succeed in the gaming?
I mean, for me, it's exactly that. It's just, people, there's brands that are going to have natural synergies and going to have gaming strategies, and there's kind of a natural link, which is brilliant. And they're the, we're talking those brands, but it's another channel. It's another channel where people are spending a hell of a lot of time with it. They're highly engaged with it. They welcome it, full attention. Lots of dwell time. So, from a lot of touch points, great share of market, great share of voice. So if you want to be a leader in that space, I would say it's pretty much open to most brands and most categories.
Brilliant.
I would, wouldn't
I? Of course you would. So at which point, I would like to thank our three panelists very much indeed. Excellent discussion. We could have gone on for much, much longer, and maybe we'll reconvene another time. But thank you very much for your time and support of the event. I would even more importantly like to thank our audience for giving up an hour of their time to listen to the discussion. Very much hope you've learned something, been intrigued. Hopefully you've downloaded the reports. Do get in touch with Anzu for more bespoke insights, or indeed just fire your briefs through to Neil. Would be very welcome. And I think what we'd like to finish with is showing you the full illustration that has been put together while we've been talking. So I'm hoping this is going to work. Here's the illustration showing on screen. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone. Wish you well for the rest of the afternoon. I think that's a fantastic illustration personally. Wish you all well for the afternoon. Thanks again, panelists. Thanks to the audience. Have a good day. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.